Well, thank you everyone for joining us for our Diversity, Inclusion, Equity, and Accessibility workshop. It's so great to have you all here, and I'm going to let Kiki and Hamal introduce themselves.
My name is Shaquila Sincere, Kiki, if you like nicknames. My pronouns are she, her, hers. And I am the assistant director, sometimes I forget, I'm the assistant director for housing and diversity education here at Mason.
And good afternoon, my name is Hamal Strayhorn. I'm the director for Coalition Building and Diversity Education, Housing, University Life. And my pronouns are he, him, his. And I'm gonna share my screen with you all of the presentation if I can find it. And I usually go through the process of, I thought Kiki was gonna be a little bit longer than I typically do. I was waiting for her to be a little bit longer.
Oh, do you need me to say more things?
No, you don't. You don't have to say more things if you don't like.
I'm a Pisces. I enjoy long walks to the fridge.
April, describe your perfect date, April 25th. Now, it's one of my favorite movies, Miss Congeniality. But yes, diversity education, and I'm working with Kiki today. She's a great human being. Love to. This is our first time having an opportunity to present with Kiki, and so I'm excited about this opportunity to talk about pulling it all together and talking about some of the things that understanding diversity, equity, and inclusion. And so I'm going to let Kiki, pull into this part to talk about hopes and fears, and as we move into our time today.
Yes, so I'm seeing that we're not full up tonight, and I think we have a little bit of time to say things out loud. So I am just going to ask folks to unmute themselves when they feel the spirit move them. Can you all give me one hope and one fear for this conversation tonight? What brought you to us? And then what is one hope and one fear? And if you want to introduce yourself when you unmute, that would be great too, so we know what to call you.
Hi, my name's Debbie Zeiker and I work in career services. So I just saw the email a few days ago and thought I'd sign up. My role at Mason is I advise students who are looking for on-campus jobs. So when I see hope and fear, for me, it's been an emotional time, and I think right now, some of my fears have escalated based on this most recent shooting in Atlanta. Mm-hmm. So I'm just tired of it. So sorry.
No, you're okay, Debbie.
And my hope is that people will just start to listen more and to step outside of their own box. That's what I wish for. And I guess that's all I would like to say right now.
Thank you so much, Debbie, for A, going first, but B, being vulnerable in this moment and sharing some true feelings. We appreciate that. Does anybody else want to share a hope and a fear for this conversation, or like Debbie just shared, for life,
Come on, people, don't be afraid.
Yeah, I'm gonna warn everybody now. I like things in threes, so I'm gonna ask 2 more people to share, and we will sit here and look at each other until I get 3 people. So I love me an uncomfortable silence.
Mm-hmm. And I don't mind sitting in silence. I'm a counselor and silence speaks. So
Okay, Kiki, I'll jump in and I'll and I'll go.
Thank
Hi, folks. To those who I don't know and haven't worked with before, my name is Christian Barber. I'm the interim director of Housing and Residence Life. So the reason I signed up for this workshop tonight is a couple of reasons. I know Kiki very well. I've worked with Hamal. I know they always do a wonderful job with every presentation and training. So I knew it would be a great, well-designed experience. And probably like many of you, a lot of times my weekday hours are really unpredictable and I can't really get a lot of time that isn't directly related to my job to do some of the professional development and discussion around DEI work. So like 7:30 at night, I can absolutely do that. So I'm thrilled that there was something outside of the 9 to 5. So I appreciate that. Hopes, and I think we're definitely going to get there. We're hoping to be able to connect with some folks who I haven't met before, haven't worked with, and not necessarily folks I've done similar trainings or just interacted with before. So looking forward to having some conversations with different folks from different backgrounds with different experiences tonight. Fears. I'm sorry, Kiki. I'm kind of struggling with the fears.
That's okay.
I would say for myself, my fear is that and I try to reflect on this often whenever we have these horrible things like what happened in Atlanta this week is fear is that the energy and momentum and the commitment to do the work kind of stalls out or isn't as strong after something isn't on the news or isn't front page on the paper the way it is currently. So that's always a fear is that the momentum will not continue the way it needs to.
Thank you, Christian. One more person willing to share their hopes and fears, please.
So what brought me to the conversation is I have this enduring interest in DEI. I'm always willing to see it from a different perspective, gain more skills. And I think I never feel like I know enough about it. So when there's an opportunity to learn more, I always take that opportunity.
Great.
So a hope is that I will come away from this with something new that I haven't seen before, I haven't heard before, or even that I'll make a connection that I didn't have before I came. A fear. I'll be totally transparent. My fear is that I won't hear anything new. That it'll be some of the same things that I've heard in other webinars or read myself. So that's a legitimate fear of mine.
Perfect. Thank you so much for sharing those with me. Thank you to everyone that shared, Debbie, Christian, and I'm sorry, I didn't ask you to introduce yourself. Can you say your name for me so I don't mess it up?
Sure. Colonel Pratt.
Okay, that's what I thought, but I didn't want to be wrong. So thank all three of you for sharing your reason for coming and your hopes and fears. I'm going to throw it to Hamal for some learning objectives so we can get into this.
Awesome sauce. And I want to just let everyone know when we put this particular presentation together, this is some of the basic learning, we want to pull it all together and help people understand and give people ideas of terminology and what people are actually talking about when they have conversation. I always tell people as a disclaimer on my end is that I don't do 101 conversations about race and around diversity, equity, and inclusion. So if you're looking for a 101 dialogue, that probably won't happen here. We are facilitating this, so we are learning. I love what Colonel said. It's about he wants to continue to learn and to grow more. We are facilitators as a part of this. The work of diversity, equity, and inclusion is never done. And so even though I sit in a position as a director And Kiki sits in the position of an assistant director, and we do this work on a daily basis. We are constantly learning. We are constantly growing. Language is constantly changing. And so we're doing our work on a daily basis. And so, but I always tell people that, you know, we're going to, if there is dialogue that needs to happen, we can go there. We can have that conversation. It can be challenging, it can be hard, and that's okay. And that is a part of the growing process. And so engaging in our learning objectives tonight, we hope that you will be able to gain a knowledge to an entry-level cultural competence idea and of a diversity and inclusion, and understanding some terminology around that. We hope that as participants, you will identify and examine individual privileges and biases, and also identifying and having the opportunity to demonstrate some inclusive practices. And through that, we'll gain an understanding of systems of privilege and oppression. So some working assumptions as we go into this presentation. None of us calls racism, sexism, heterosexism, classism, ableism, or any other type of ism. So unless you were here at the creation of the United States and had a hand in passing codes that constructed race and began to develop some of those things in our nation, you did not cause any of those things. However, there are people who are oppressed and affected by some of these systems of oppression that were created and institutionalized. And there's some people who benefit from that, whether we like it or not. This is a truth, whether we want to embrace that truth or not. Those are some of the working assumptions that we have tonight, and we can have dialogue around that. And this is also a learning opportunity. So people may say some things as we are engaging in this conversation tonight that may sound ignorant. This is a part of the learning process. This here tonight is a space, I always say a space for grace, and a space that you can be able to speak freely. This is a dialogue and not a debate. And so we can have conversations tonight, and you may not understand things, and we can have a conversation about that. I'd rather for those conversations to take place here than to be in a space where those conversations can lead to some critical incidences and hurt feelings. So I'm going to turn it back over to Kiki to talk about rights and responsibilities.
Thanks, Amal. So before we get started, we would just like to lay down some ground rules for how we will talk to one another in this conversation. I did all of this with my hands because I don't like ground rules. In real life, there are no ground rules for any kind of tough conversation. So I don't necessarily like to attach them to things that I facilitate, but we always have rights and responsibilities, right? So I'm just gonna read through some of our rights and responsibilities. There are 9 of them. And if you all could just indicate in some way, raise your hand, nod your head, that we can agree to these things, I would appreciate that. Let me move faces. Okay. So you have the right to reflect on the experiences shared here today. You have the responsibility to treat people's stories and narratives in confidence. So folks may share some personal things with us today. We are going to remember those stories. But when we go out and we tell people about the experience that we have here, we won't share those exact stories. We'll just share the things that we learned from those stories. Can we agree to that? Awesome. I'm seeing nods, I'm seeing hands. This is great. You have a right to your assumptions. You have a responsibility to question those assumptions. So folks will say things today, and we will, as human beings, make judgments about what we think their motives are and all these different things. You are free to do that you are a person. But let's make sure that when we do make these assumptions, we question them within ourselves. And then if we need clarification, we question them out loud. Well, what do you mean by that? Is that something we can agree to? Awesome, great. You have a right to share what you would like to share. You have a responsibility not to generalize when doing so. So I, as a Black woman, will not speak for the Black women's delegation tonight. I will just be telling my story and my story alone. Can we all agree to just tell our own stories and not speak for our groups? Awesome, fantastic. We're gonna keep this thing moving. I am not in control.
Oh, sorry.
No, that's okay. I clicked the thing and I was like, wait, it's not changing. So you have the right to engage with opposing viewpoints. You have a responsibility to let people finish their thoughts before speaking. So we want to give everyone the opportunity to get their thoughts and opinions and ideas across tonight. And in order to do that, we're going to let folks finish speaking before we go ahead and think for a second and then respond. Can we agree to that? Amazing. You have a right to feel some type of way. You have a responsibility to express that to the group in ways that can be heard. So again, it is always a mixed bag in these conversations of what folks might say. I don't necessarily believe in safe spaces because like people can't know everything and we won't know what is and isn't offensive, right? So this is a brave space and people may say something that that will push you outside of your comfort zone or make you uncomfortable, right? When that happens, it is okay to express that discomfort, but we want to do so in a way that can be heard. So when you said that thing, it made me feel this way. Here's why. Can we all agree to express ourselves in ways that can be heard? Awesome, fantastic. You have a right to disagree with ideas. You have a responsibility to respect the person exposing those ideas. So in the same vein of what I just said, folks may have ideas that you disagree with tonight, and that is okay. You will say that you disagree in a way that can be heard and in a way that is respectful to the other person. So you just said X, I disagree with that, here's why. Can we all agree to be respectful in the ways that we communicate with one another?
Can I ask a question real quick?
Yes, please.
I always wonder when people throw the word respect out, like what exactly does that mean to everybody?
Mm-hmm. Yep, and I think it is, so we could do this two ways, right? And Hamal, you jump in with what you think. We can, as a group, define what we want respect to mean in this group, or when we feel disrespected, we can name that in the moment. And that can be one of our rights and responsibilities. So again, you have a right to feel some type of way, right? But you have a responsibility to express that in the group in ways that can be heard. So when you feel disrespected, you should be able to, this is a space in which you can say, hey, I feel like you're disrespecting, I'm gonna use an example. So you just said this thing about Black people. I find that super disrespectful. Here's why. What do we want to go with? We can define respect. And Hamal, I don't know how much time we have. I'm a super terrible timekeeper. So we can define respect as a group, or we can move forward with agreeing to name our moments where we feel disrespected. What do y'all think?
I can name it. That's fine by me.
Okay, so we'll name it in the moment. You are welcome to do that. All right. And then final set of rights and responsibilities. You have the right to share your views. Also, thank you, Colonel, for getting a little clarification on that. Please, everyone, ask questions or make comments when you have them. So you have a right to share your views. You have a responsibility to monitor the space that you take up. So we want to hear from all of the participants tonight. And we are in a bit of a time crunch. So we want to make sure that we have space for everyone. We don't want you to limit yourselves, but we do want to monitor the space that we take up so we can ensure everybody has the opportunity to share what they would like to. Can we agree to monitor the space that we take up. Amazing. You have a right to counter information that you think is incorrect. You have a responsibility to consider a person's socialization and try to reserve judgment. So tonight we'll ask you to draw from your own experiences in some instances, and everyone's experience is different. That's what makes us interesting. We're just asking that you consider that as people give responses that you may or may not agree with. So try to reserve judgments. Judgment is totally human. It's something that you will do, but try not to kind of react in that judgment, and recognize that folks have had different experiences and you may disagree because your experiences are different. Can we agree to reserve our judgment and consider socialization? All right. And then finally, you have a right to tell us how you identify. You have a responsibility to call others by the groups and names that they prefer. So in mine and Hamal's Zoom name banner thing, you'll see our pronouns after our names. We will refer to everybody in this group by their name and their pronouns. If you would like to add your pronouns to your Zoom name, that is helpful. But yes, we will make an effort to call people what they would like to be called. Is that something we can all agree to? Fantastic. All right. So that is rights and responsibilities. So we are going to start with a short video. It is one that I love because it talks a little bit about right and wrong, and good and bad, and the dichotomy of these things. And I think it takes away a lot of anxiety and like fear when having conversations about difference. So I always like to show this video to start things off, to put people in the right headspace. That is all I'll say on that. We'll debrief it after it plays. Go for it, Hamal. And it's a little bit long, it's 12 minutes, but it's good.
I want to talk a little bit about race tonight, or to be more precise, I want to talk about how we talk about race, how we engage in race conversations, and how we might get a little bit better at it in some ways. And that's a topic that I have always enjoyed. Most Americans avoid race conversations like the plague, and we often take our ability to avoid it and use it as a measure of our progress and enlightenment.
What is happening?
I want to talk a little bit about race tonight, or to be more precise, I want to talk about how we talk about race, how we engage in race conversations, and how we might get a little bit better at it in some ways. And that's a topic that I have always enjoyed. Most Americans avoid race conversations like the plague, and we often take our ability to avoid it and use it as a measure of our progress and enlightenment, which I think is kind of telling in and of itself. But I've always been drawn to those conversations and fascinated by them, in part because growing up as a very light-skinned black man of mixed descent, I often find myself in sort of peculiar race-based conversations. Oftentimes when I'm meeting someone for the first time, rather than making small talk, they'll immediately present me with a philosophical conundrum. They will ask, "What are you?" And I'll have to explain, I'm not a philosophy major, and my father is black, my mother's white, what are we? I don't know. So I've always had a passion for studying and observing how we communicate about race and how we might get a little better at certain aspects of that communication. And I made a video commentary named How to Tell Someone They Sound Racist, which talks about a particular type of race conversation, which usually doesn't involve any explicit racist intent. There's no blatant racism involved. It usually involves well-intentioned people, but it's a situation where one of us feels a need to tell someone that something they said may have had connotations they weren't aware of, or they may have done something that had a hurtful impact that they might not have been aware of. And that's a conversation we all find ourselves in from time to time. And it's a conversation that usually goes horribly. Because no matter how clear you try to be in conveying that you're not attacking the person, you're just trying to offer a specific critique about something that just happened, when we are receiving that sort of critique, we tend to deeply personalize it and take it as a personal attack, and we tend to respond by saying, are you saying that I am racist? How could you say I am a good person? Why would you say that I am a racist? And you try to explain, no, I'm talking about the particular thing that you say, no, I am not a racist. And what started out as a what you said conversation turns into a what you are conversation, or what I am conversation, which is a dead end that produces nothing except mutual frustration. And you never wind up seeing eye to eye or finding any common ground. So in my video, I offered some suggestions for how we might stay focused on the what you said conversation and find some common ground. And that video, most videos on YouTube die off after 48 hours, but this video really struck a chord, which I think shows how hungry many of us are to find better ways to communicate on these issues. And the two types of feedback I get most commonly on that video are, one, I really appreciated the perspective you gave about staying focused on a what you are conversation. And the second type of feedback I get is, I tried the strategies you suggested about staying on the what you are conversation, and they actually never work. And this is true, unfortunately. No matter what angle you take as far as voicing that critique, the vast majority of the time, it's still going to lapse into a defensive what I am conversation. I think framing it as clearly as you can in that what you said form is still valuable, because it makes the substance of your beef as clear as possible to other people observing the conversation, especially in public discourse. And it gives both of you the best shot at finding common ground and seeing eye to eye. It's worth going for that 10%, but generally the success rate might be higher here at Hampshire College. But where I live on the internet, the success rate tends to be around 10%. So since I made that video and took in that feedback, I've been thinking about what other approaches we might be able to take. And I think since we can never entirely fix that conversation by changing how we voice the critique, I think we might be able to also make it budge a little bit by considering how we receive that critique and how we might be able to take a suggestion that we may have said or done something racist and take it in stride and not completely freak out and assume that the world thinks that I'm a bad person. So the first thing that makes it difficult to accept that critique, that you may have said something racist, is simply that it involves the possibility that you made a mistake. And none of us takes that too well. None of us enjoys that. But in most other situations, when the possibility arises that we made a mistake, we are usually able to take a few deep breaths and tell ourselves, I'm only human. Everyone makes mistakes. But when it comes to conversations involving race and prejudice, for some reason, we tend to make the opposite assumption. We deal with race and prejudice with this all or nothing, good person, bad person binary, in which either you are racist or you are not racist. And if you're not batting 1,000, then you're striking out every time. And this puts us in a situation where we're striving to meet an impossible standard. And if anything less than perfection means that you are a racist, that means any suggestion that you've made a mistake, any suggestion that you've been less than perfect, is a suggestion that you're a bad person. So we become averse to any suggestion that we should consider our thoughts and actions. And it makes it harder for us to work on our imperfections. When you believe that you must be perfect in order to be good, it makes you averse to recognizing your own inevitable imperfections, and that lets them stagnate and grow. So the belief that you must be perfect in order to be good is an obstacle to being as good as you can be. So it would make our conversations with each other a lot smoother, and it would make us better at being good if we could recognize that we're not perfect and embrace that. So I want to offer a couple of things that you could keep in mind when you need to remind yourself that I'm not supposed to be perfect when it comes to navigating race. And the first thing is that anytime we're dealing with race issues, we are dealing with a social construct that was not born out of any science or reason or logic. We are grappling with a social construct that was not designed to make sense. And to the extent that it is the product of design, the race constructs that we live in America were shaped specifically by a desire to avoid making sense. They were shaped for centuries by a need to rationalize and justify indefensible acts. So when we grapple with race issues, we're grappling with something that was designed for centuries to make us circumvent our best instincts. It's a dance partner that's designed to trip us up. So just based on that alone, we should be able to keep in mind that you will never bat 1,000 when it comes to dealing with race issues. And the other thing that we need to keep in mind is, as we are all imperfect humans, and as has been laid out in some of the other talks this evening, we all have unconscious thought processes and psychosocial mechanisms that prop up. There are many things in our day-to-day lives that lead us towards developing little pockets of prejudice, that lead us towards acting unkind to others without having any intent to do so. These are things that will just naturally develop in our day-to-day lives. So the problem with that all or nothing binary is it causes us to look at racism and prejudice as if they are akin to having tonsils. Like you either have tonsils or you don't. And if you've had your prejudice removed, you never need to consider. So if someone says, I think you may have a little unconscious prejudice, you say, well, no, my prejudice was removed in 2005. I went to see that movie Crash. It's all good. But that's not how these things work. When you go through your day-to-day lives, there are all of these mass media and social stimuli, as well as processes that we all have inside our brains that we're not aware of, that cause us to build up little pockets of prejudice every day, just like plaque develops on our teeth. So we need to move away from the tonsils paradigm of race discourse towards the dental hygiene paradigm of race discourse, is basically, that's if I could offer one piece of advice. And in general, I think we need to move away from the premise that being a good person is a fixed, immutable characteristic, and shift towards seeing being good as a practice. And it is a practice that we carry out by engaging with our imperfections. So we need to shift towards thinking of being a good person the same way we think of being a clean person. Being a clean person is something that you maintain and work on every day. We don't assume that I'm a clean person, therefore I don't need to brush my teeth. And when someone suggests to us that we've got something stuck in our teeth, we don't say, what do you mean? I have something stuck in my teeth, I'm a clean person. Why would you? So I know that this is no small task, but if we can shift a little bit closer towards viewing those race conversations the same way we view a conversation about something stuck in our teeth, it will go a long way towards making our conversations a bit smoother and allow us to work together on bigger issues around race, because there are a lot of, beyond the persistent conversational awkwardness of race, there are persistent systemic and institutional issues around race that are not caused by conversation, and they can't be entirely solved by conversation. You can't talk them away, but we need people to work together and coordinate and communicate to find strategies to work on those systemic issues, because despite all of the barriers that we've broken, all of the apparent markers of progress, there are still so many disparities if you look at unemployment rate, infant mortality rate, incarceration rates, median household income. There are so many disparities on the various sides of the color lines in this country that it is worthwhile for us to iron out these conversational issues, if for nothing else, so that we can get a little bit closer to working together on those big issues. So I hope that we can, if I could have one wish, it would be that we would reconsider how we conceptualize being a good person, and keep in mind that we are not good despite our imperfections. It is the connection we maintain with our imperfections that allows us to be good. Our connection with our personal and common imperfections, being mindful of those personal and common imperfections, is what allows us to be good to each other and be good to ourselves. So, so I know that this is no easy task, and race may be the most difficult sphere in which to apply this concept, but I think it's where it could also reap the most rewards. So I hope that bit by bit, if we consider that and are mindful of it, we can shift away from taking it as an indictment of our goodness and move towards taking it as a gesture of respect and an act of kindness when someone tells us that we've got something racist stuck in our teeth.
So that is one of my favorite videos to start with, just because it talks to us a little bit about the good, bad binary, and opens us up to being able to make some mistakes, because we will probably make some mistakes in our conversation tonight. And I want folks to know that's okay. Before we press forward, does anybody want to share any initial thoughts, feelings, reactions to this video? And I have dropped the link to it in the chat.
I enjoyed hearing the concept of practice because it's something we talk about a lot with mindfulness. Like it's a mindfulness practice, which means I'm still learning and growing and trying. And I like that concept of you can do something wrong. It's okay. Kind of getting past that, like, oh, I just don't want to say anything because whatever I say is wrong. Thinking of it as a growing experience.
Yes, yes. I think we learn the most when we make mistakes. Especially when we are around people who are patient with us, right? And kind, enough to say like, hey, you said this thing, and it sounds this way to me. Is that what you meant to do? Because oftentimes when folks do make these mistakes, they don't mean to. So yes, thank you, Carrie. Any other thoughts, feelings, reactions before we press on?
Unless they tell you that they mean to.
Yeah.
But, and so, sorry, Colonel.
I like thinking of it as having something stuck in your teeth, because I don't know about anybody else, but if I've had a meal and after that meal I've had a long conversation with somebody, and then I go into the bathroom and I see a piece of broccoli stuck in my teeth, I'm like, y'all just let me go on. Nobody said anything. Y'all was just gonna let me keep going around with broccoli in my teeth. Really? Like, I would want somebody to tell me that my mouth looks jacked up because I got food stuck in my teeth. So if we have that kind of attitude about when we make mistakes, especially when they're honest mistakes, if we have that attitude, like, I wish somebody would tell me, would you please tell me when I mess up? I think that we can receive it better than if we think, like he said, I'm a clean person. I couldn't possibly have anything stuck in my teeth.
But that leads me to ask the question, is that why do people, when we talk about have difficult conversations, particularly around race, racism, why is it hard for people to have this conversation, particularly in today's society?
I think some of it could be, it kind of revolves around some of the things that Jay was saying in the video, that at least at Mason, I'm thinking of the situations at Mason. I think sometimes people, they are afraid of saying the wrong thing because they may think of themselves as not prejudiced or not biased or whatever. And so they're respectful of other people's feelings. So I think that's sometimes why people tend to hold back, is they are afraid. They don't want to hurt anybody's feelings. Like, maybe they want to know more, but they don't quite know how to phrase a question or ask it. My family, I have a very diverse family. I've got all colors of the rainbow. I've got different sexualities in my family. And so I'm always learning. And so we've kind of learned to, to talk to each other, or just question each other, or call each other out on something. And so that's been a really cool thing for me. But I think in work situations, when you're working with people in particular, that it's more often that you're afraid that you will hurt somebody's feelings by not, whatever it is you say. So.
I also feel like topics around racism are really delicate and fragile, and usually our intuitions tells us to not play very much with things that are very delicate. For example, when you're holding an egg, you're really very careful. You don't want to break it. And I think conversations around racism are really very delicate. And also, we have a lot of preconceived idea around the topic that it's very easy to misinterpret somebody. For example, somebody of your race may do a particular action or make a particular comment, and that is going to be totally fine as compared to somebody else of the other race. So we have these preconceived ideas, and we built up on those to really interpret some of the behaviors that may be, portrayed by another person. So I also think that these are some of the reasons that makes us being really, to avoid this type of conversations.
Yep, I agree with that. I'm going to tell a short story because I think it'll add to this, right? So I also think something that holds us back is like conditioning, right? And socialization. So I used to work at Best Buy. And one day, this little girl and her mom, both white folks, came into the store, and I'm checking them out. I work at the register. So I'm checking them out. And the little girl is looking between me and her mom. She looks at her, she looks at me, she looks at her, she looks at me, and she looks at me and she goes, "You're brown." And the mom is like, "No, you can't say that." And in my head, I don't say this because I'm at work and I want to keep my job for the time being, but like, no, girl, like, that's okay. I knew I was brown when I came here today. I woke up brown. Yeah, your child is observant. And there shouldn't be anything wrong with saying that I am brown. But for the mom to react like that, that little girl is now going to associate like pointing out difference, or just being brown with being wrong, right? So sometimes you're socialized in different ways, and you take those lessons with you as life goes on.
And that is very much true.
Mm-hmm. Okay, in the interest of time, I'll take one more comment if anybody has a comment, but then we'll push forward.
Just real quick, I think it's important for us to always push back against binary thinking. We're still fighting the concept of people being colorblind. Like, you either see color or you don't, and it's foolish, first of all, to think that no one sees the color of another person's skin. But then also, a newer idea of people being woke. Like, you're woke, so nobody can tell you anything about race or gender or sexuality or anything because you're woke. You know it all of a sudden. And again, it's a binary kind of thinking that we have to push back against.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And if I could ask Shakila, well, how would you have felt if the mother had said to her daughter, "Why, yes, she is. She's brown and she's beautiful." What would your feelings have been if that had been the situation?
I think that's fine. It's okay with me to state facts. I'm a brown person.
And I think that's one of the things that, I think that people consistently, because of socialization, we say things like, "I don't care if you black, brown, if you're black, brown, polka dot, or purple." And to me, when I hear that language, one, it shows me that people are, you don't have a concept of socialization, right? When you start saying, "I don't care if people are polka dot or brown," because the polka dot or purple, one, people are not. I know the intent is to say, "Oh, I'm just trying to be nice," but the impact is saying you don't see me. And you don't see you, or people say, "Oh, I don't see color," and you're telling that child that you're dismissing this child, and this child is saying, "This is a brown person," and it's recognizing that this person is a brown person. This person is or if you want to categorize it with the socially constructed race, this person is a black person, and it's okay to recognize that. I said that to one of my good friends who said that to me. "Oh, I don't see color," and work friends, and I said, "Well, that's interesting because every morning when I wake up and look in the mirror, I see a black man." And when you don't say that, that is very micro invalidating. And we're going to talk about microaggressive. It's micro invalidating, and because it shows that you don't see me.
Mhm.
And you also don't see my struggle, or as a person of color that identifies as a part of the African diaspora. And so it's okay to see color. I remember, a similar story. I remember sitting in a doctor's office one day, and of course my name is Hamal. So a lot of times people think, first of all, they think I'm Middle Eastern, and because it's Hamal, and so they struggle even to say my name. And then when it comes, it's like, who is this? And I heard the nurse chatting with the other nurse, the front desk person, and the lady was trying to express who I was without saying he's the black man over there in the corner, because I was one of the only black people in that particular place. I lived in a very homogenous area, and it's like, he's tall, he's bald, and I'm like, there's a man sitting beside me who was also tall and bald, I'm like, it's me. And I just like, it's me. And I told her, I said, it's okay to say I'm black. It's okay. And having to process this through with people, and it's okay to recognize those differences, because we are different. We're all, it be based on that, either if it's a visible or invisible identity, we have differences, and those can be recognized.
I'm going to talk about the slide just as we
just go ahead.
So just some really quick key concepts through some areas we want to take you through as we have our conversation, right? So we're going to learn a little bit about the comfort zone, the learning edge, and the danger zone, right? As we have this conversation tonight, I'm sorry that I am doing a lot with my face right now. There's an eyelash in there or something. As we go through this conversation tonight, we are probably going to begin in our comfort zone, right? We're going to tell stories that relate, but don't really put us in an area of discomfort, right? We're going to stick to the things that we are comfortable talking about. As we go on and get more comfortable with each other, I am hoping that we can get into a bit of a learning edge, right? So we ask questions. Debbie, you asked me a question. So what would have been my response if the mother had been like, yes, she is brown? That is, for me, that is a learning edge question, because you were vulnerable, you put yourself out there, and you asked something, you asked me to expound upon something so that you could further your own knowledge. I like that. We're trying to get everybody into the learning edge. And then we want to play on the line of the danger zone. I'm doing my little danger zone dance. We want to play on the line of the danger zone, but we don't want folks to feel triggered. So if there are things that are said that take you to a traumatic moment, please feel free to cut your camera and take a step back. We are going to, I feel like there is some type of oppressive background to trial by fire. So I don't think I'm supposed to say that. But we are going to ask you to engage as you see fit, and when you need to get disengaged for your mental health or your well-being, please do so. But let's try to stay in the learning edge as we talk to one another tonight. And Hamal is going to take us through our first activity.
And so I was going to give us an opportunity I was going to do breakout rooms, but we really don't have time for that. But I just have these three questions up here to think and share, and to think about, why do we do diversity training? What does diversity and inclusion and inclusivity mean to you? And what does your definition of diversity look like on a college campus? And if I get maybe 2 or 3 people to maybe share their thoughts.
I'm going to go to question number 3. What does your definition look like on a college of diversity look like on a college campus? I've been at Mason since 2001, And so it's always been a pretty diverse campus, and it has become more diverse as the years have gone by. And it used to kind of trouble me when I would go into the JC and see all the students sitting, you know, at all the tables, but they were all within their own groups, usually defined by race or international, your ethnicity, what country you were from. I didn't see it being mixed up a lot. So I've sometimes asked myself, you know, and it's right now, so it may have changed a lot, and because I don't go to the JC as much as I used to, but to me, true diversity is when you see a lot of mixing up of the groups of people, and it doesn't mean that you can't be with people that you identify with, but I like to see people mixing it up and sharing conversation and sharing stories instead of always sticking to people that they identify with. Does that make sense?
Yes, ma'am, it does. Thank you for sharing. Anyone else like to share?
Yeah, I'll tackle why have diversity training. I think one must have diversity training because for the most part, when we're doing this work at whatever level, most of us don't have the vocabulary. It's you need a certain language. You need to know how to discuss certain things and be given permission to as you say, make some mistakes, use the wrong language, and be a learner.
Thank you. One more person would like to share.
I can share something quick. I'll also kind of speak to number one. The first thing that came to mind for me was way back, flashback to growing up, and you know the community I came from, very, very white area, very, very little exposure myself to diverse populations until I went to college. And so for the first 18 plus years of my life, the limited amount of exposure to what I would loosely call diversity education didn't have any sort of intentionality or real educational focus around it. And I'll give an example that still sticks with me to this day. I would remember every year in school in February, teachers would put up different, you know, what were meant to be educational bulletin boards, information about Black History Month. In March, it would be about Women's History Month. But we never had a conversation about why, like what it was. And then there, you know, 10, 12, 13-year-old students would ask the questions like, well, where's White History Month? Where's Men's History Month? Because we never were educated on the context around, here's why we are taking the opportunity to celebrate and recognize specific populations within our global community. And it wasn't really for me until I went to college and truly had what I would consider a diversity training of any sort as a, you know, a student or a student leader, where the dots started to connect in terms of, oh, okay, I'm really understanding. And looking back, I'm like, gosh, I made it that far in my life without having a deeper understanding of it. But I'm sure that's true for a good number of our students today, depending on, you know, where home is and what they were exposed to or not.
Thank you, Christian. You led me into my next slide. If it goes to my next slide. So so why do the work of diversity and inclusion? You know, just understanding the statistics, hate crimes on college campuses and in our nation have increased within the last 2 years. And hate crimes around race, ethnicity, around sexual orientation and identity. It's not only increased in the world, but it's in the, I would say, outside of the campus grounds, but it has also increased on campus grounds. We see the rise of that it consistently increases, and it has increased more and more over the past 2 years. For those who don't know, Virginia is the 12th most racially diverse state, but it is the 13th most segregated state. And it's very similar to what Christian was saying, is because our students, even though we're a diverse state, but because students are coming to our campus relatively not interacting or engaging with diversity, we these types of things continue to persist, stereotypes continue to persist because they don't have any interaction with anyone outside of their own racial dynamic, racial group. And also there's no connection there's no connection when they come to campus. And so now they're thrown on this campus with a whole bunch of different people where they don't have any type of had no previous interaction with. And so this is why it's important for us to learn about one another, about whether that's about race, whether that's around sexual identity. And then even considering diversity training, even workplace discrimination stereotypes persist, leading cause of employees leaving their position. I just recently just had some conversations around discrimination and issues with some employees just recently, and some of them were afraid that other people who looked like them were going to leave their department based off of discrimination and stereotypes. And in talking about just some of the areas of identity that people are typically discriminated against, age is one of those spaces. I always say people are discriminated twice within age. When you're between your teenage years and up to 21, people say they don't listen to you because you're not old enough to understand anything. You're just a baby. You're just in college. And then when you get around 65, then you become senile and naive. They should take your keys away when you're 50. I consistently joke with my mother and father who are now in their 70s, and I was just home with them a week ago, and I consistently say it's hard to raise good parents these days. But you're in this age group where there's discrimination against and this happens twice in individuals' lifetimes, typically around disability or ability, or whether there's a disability that's developmental or an acquired disability. Sometimes people face areas of discrimination in religion, or oftentimes ethnicity, sexual orientation, indigenous heritage, and trauma, even body size. And I think about when we look at our campus, is it diverse for body size? When you look at our how our classrooms are set up, desk, if a big bodied person was to come into your classroom, would they be comfortable sitting at a desk or sitting in chairs in your office? And then you can talk about first language and also gender identity. We do have another slide on intersectionality.
When I was in high school, my social studies teacher asked us to complete the sentence, I am. The catch was you could only use one word to describe yourself, but I have a lot of words. I'm Asian, I'm a woman, I'm a lesbian, I'm an immigrant. Even my name, Jiang Mengjue, is not a single word. So in one word, I am intersectional. What is intersectionality? An intersectional person is someone who's part of a number of marginalized groups. For example, some intersections are being gay and black, being woman and disabled, and being Chinese and lesbian, and pretty cute too. We are the kind of people who check off a lot of boxes when it comes to gender, sexuality, race, ability, class, body size. So, are white straight men intersectional with all their privilege? Yes, they can be. But the term intersectionality was coined by Kimberly Crenshaw to specifically illustrate the marginalized communities. She used it to explain the problems that immigrant women of color were facing in the 80s. She found that neither the feminist or anti-racist movements were fully helping them to solve the problems. What about LGBT activism? It also struggles to address the problems of intersectional LGBT people. Call Me By Your Name, Brokeback Mountain, More Than Family, Will and Grace feature amazing queer characters, but they're only white, cis, upper-class gay men. In contrast, Moonlight is much more intersectional. Its lead character Chiron is not only gay, but also black, poor, a survivor of domestic violence, and the prison pipeline. These many aspects of Chiron inform each other. So, should I feel guilty for watching Call Me by Your Name 5 times? No, but just remember, Moonlight is more intersectional and we need more stories like that. But even in Moonlight, where are the queer women? Enter feminism! Feminism strives for a society where women have equal rights to men. Equal rights. Intersectional feminism works to include all women, not just the least oppressed ones. Because there are so many kinds of women, we need to fight oppression from all sides and stand together, even if the oppression doesn't directly target you. Nobody is perfect, but understanding intersectionality can make us more empathetic and more equal. So, what can we do? First, actively learn about different communities. But what if I offend somebody with my questions? Well, Google doesn't judge. You can do your research at home. Hey Google, why do Asians all have such small eyes? Second, you can ask people questions, but don't make assumptions. Be polite and listen. But what if I really can't understand why on earth this Chinese lesbian immigrant is doing this video? Well, you should respect her anyway. Finally, in order to let more people learn about intersectionality, share this video and tell us what you think. That's a wrap.
Yes, that was a really cool video about intersectionality. Yes, initial thoughts, feelings, reactions. None? Okay, that's cool. I have an initial thought, feeling, reaction. There was a point in this video where she talked about can a like cisgender straight white man be intersectional? I would, if those are the only identities that we are considering, I would argue that the answer is no. There is a difference between intersectionality and being a multifaceted human being, right? Intersectionality speaks specifically to systems of oppression, overlapping systems of oppression and how those inform one another. If you are a straight cis white man and you are disabled, that is an oppression, right? You face oppression because of your disability, but that does not necessarily make you intersectional because there's nothing that's layering with that. You can be multifaceted. We're all multifaceted. Some of us have intersecting identities. Does that make sense? Cool, we're gonna keep this train moving then.
Awesome. Other key concepts. Understanding systematic oppression, systems that maintain advantages and disadvantages based on social groups. There are many forms of oppression, systematic oppression of social groups, memberships, and operates intentionally and unintentionally on individual, societal, and cultural institutional levels. Talking about privilege is unearned, it's unasked for, and we're moving pretty quickly because it's almost 9 o'clock. It's unearned, it's privilege is unearned, unasked for, and often invisible benefits. And then privilege is an unfavorable opinion and feelings informed and beforehand. I'm giving you these definitions only because we're going to move into a space to where we're going to have a game called Name That Oppression. And we're only going to do 1 or 2 of those slides, and then we're going to move to the very end because I want to honor and honor your time. And understanding discrimination. Discrimination is the practice of unfair treatment of a person or group. And then microaggressions, we talked a little bit about that at the very beginning. These are brief, commonplace, daily and verbal behaviors, in environmental indignities, whether intentional or unintentional. And these, an example of a microaggression is, we talked a little bit about, I don't see color. Or could you give me the Black perspective? Could you tell me why women think this way? Or could you give me this perspective based off of the group that you may identify with? I'm sorry?
You're so articulate.
And then power. and is the ability to control others and events and resources. And this is where power, and when we talk about racism, and this is where power and privilege and discrimination meet. And when we talk about racism or other forms of systems of oppression, is a group with power could utilizing their privilege to set up systems of oppression. And a lot of times when we talk about the issues of racism and what racism is, sometimes I tell people that when, the worst thing that ever happened to the definition of racism is Webster, because then it made anyone who hates someone to be racist. And racism is at its foundation has power and privilege, which keeps people systematically oppressed. And so people sometimes talk about, well, there's Black racism or people of color racism, and there's white racism here in the United States. And what I utilize to help them understand racism, an example that I utilize to help people understand racism is that if you say there's Black racism, I ask them to think about, as a group, how have Black people adversely affected the lives of white people as a group? And then I turn that question around, is how have white people as a group adversely affected the lives of Black people or people of color as a group in the United States? And typically when it's around Black racism, it goes around fear. And when we talk about white racism and white supremacy and upholding whiteness, it goes around environmental, it goes within other systems of institution, keeping people out. And so when we look at the system and the power that is keeping people out, you can fear me as a person of color, and you can hate me, or I can hate you. And I can hate you all the way to the bank if you're a person that is white, but it's not going to stop you from getting a loan for a home. It's not going to stop you from getting into an institution that is going to propel you to places that you may be successful. So it's power and privilege meeting those systems of oppression. And then implicit bias is also a mental process that causes most of us to have negative attitudes about people in groups. Any questions, queries, snide remarks?
Sorry, can I just say something really quick about,
Yes.
and you didn't have to go back, but really quick about reverse racism or Black racism. On its face, those things don't work. And I like to point that out anytime we talk about it. Just because if you have to say reverse racism, you agree that it usually only goes one way, right? Like if I have to clarify that this is reverse racism, then you agree. It's usually just white people who are being racist. So yeah, on its face, most of the time you can see that those things don't work.
So we're gonna just watch one of these videos, and we call it Name That Oppression, but since we don't have a lot of time, I'm just gonna show you the video and then we'll talk about the oppression.
Hi there.
Hi.
Nice day, huh?
Yeah, finally, right?
Where are you from? Your English is perfect.
San Diego. We speak English there.
Oh, no. Where are you from?
Well, I was born in Orange County, but I never actually lived there.
I mean before that.
Before I was born.
Yeah, like, where are your people from?
Well, my great-grandma was from Seoul.
Korean. I knew it. I was like, she's either Japanese or Korean, but I was leaning more towards Korean.
Amazing.
Yeah. Hamshasina. There's a really good teriyaki barbecue place near my apartment. So I actually really like kimchi.
Cool. What about you? Where are you from?
San Francisco.
But where are you from?
Oh, I'm just American.
Really? You're Native American?
No, just regular American. Oh, well, I guess my grandparents are from England.
Oh, well. Hello, Governor! What's all this then? Top of the morning to you. Let's get a small tea. Double, toil and trouble. Mind the gap! Beware Jack the Ripper! Bloody hell! Pip pip! Cheerio! I think your people's fish and chips are amazing.
You're weird.
Really? I'm weird? Must be a Korean thing.
So if we were talking about naming naming that oppression, that would be, I don't know what's happening. That would be microaggression and race, ethnicity. Kiki, you want to talk about that anymore?
Yeah, I love that video a lot. You all probably saw me moving my mouth with the jokes. But I really like that video because it's a common occurrence, right, for folks who are different. And I have found that oftentimes when folks are trying to relate to people, but they don't necessarily know them, they will pick from the few things that they do know about a particular culture or race, right? And they'll try to use those things. Oh yeah, you know, I love hip hop music. I have an adopted sister who has hair just like yours. That's happened to me. And they do so with good intentions, right? They want to get to know you. But by placing all of those things on you, it becomes awkward and weird. And which becomes obvious when she turns it around on him. So yeah, I love that video because it's a good depiction of that.
I typically show this particular video. I'm not sure if anyone has seen Hidden Figures before. Has anyone had the opportunity to see Hidden Figures?
Yes.
This particular video is when she is going to the bathroom. And I wish I could show it but for some reason it's not showing up it's not showing to play on the screen. But this is when she comes back in and she's telling her supervisor there is no place for her to use the bathroom. So she has to go almost a half a mile to use the restroom. And this particular scene that hopefully it would have played, it shows the institutionalized discrimination and racism. Because in the US, we know that there was laws prohibiting Black people from interacting and engaging with white people. We had Black codes during slavery and Jim Crow laws during after the civil rights and post-Reconstruction. And so Jim Crow laws prevented individuals of color and white people from utilizing the bathroom. We will move on to inclusivity and inclusion and what is it and why is it important? The fact or policy of not excluding members of participants on the grounds of gender, race, and class is particularly this understanding of inclusion and why we are including people and having people's voices and stories are part of those experiences, and so they can be heard and seen. I think a lot of times when we talk about diversity, we'll say, you know, George Mason is a very diverse campus. We have diverse staff or diverse students, and it gets clouded up with not understanding that we can be diverse, but people's voices may not be included. We can have a beautiful color of diversity, whether that falls in gender, race, sexuality, or gender identity or disability, but are these voices at the table? Are we hearing their stories? Are we changing policies and procedures to meet the needs of this community? And so that is a part of understanding and being inclusive. And then tools that prevent inclusion, words like I don't see color. Why do we need to talk about race? And so having these conversations, hearing this language really shows people that they don't feel included in being a part of part of campus, a part of a department, and a part of color, trying to dismiss certain things that happen in the past and happen in history can also be tools that prevent inclusion as well. Kiki?
Yep, all of those, all of the things on the previous slide are examples of, or will fall into one of the 4 frames of colorblind racism. This was introduced by, oh goodness, Eduardo Bonilla Silva. Yep, this was introduced by Eduardo Bonilla Silva. Yep, can't give you a year, should have put it on the slide there. But I am just very quickly going to go through the 4 frames of colorblind racism. And these are the basic reasons, the basic ways that folks will reason away racial difference, right? So the first is abstract liberalism, that involves using ideas associated with political liberalism and economic liberalism in an abstract manner to explain racial matters. To this day, I have no idea what that means. What abstract liberalism is just the idea that we all have access to the same opportunities, right? So if we all have access to the same opportunities, abstract liberalism might sound like affirmative action is just reverse racism. Abstract liberalism allows for us to ignore that there are built-in systemic pressures and oppressions that keep people from being able to, I want to say, make good choices, right? So we talk about folks who end up in certain situations and we say, oh, they just made bad choices. Some people don't have the option of making good choices, right? And abstract liberalism ignores the fact that situational circumstances are different for everyone. Naturalism is the mindset that racism happens naturally, or that racial friction happens because it cannot be avoided. So that's just the way that things are. Cultural racism relies on culturally based arguments to explain the standing of minorities in society. You know, blacks are in the condition that they are in because they are just lazy. It assigns a characteristic to an entire group rather than looking at the different, again, situational pressures that may leave them in a state, right? And then minimization suggests discrimination is no longer a central factor affecting minorities' life outcomes. So racism isn't as bad as it used to be. Phrases like that minimize the impact of things that people are still facing.
Just some final thoughts. Just as we go through it says, we need to focus on relationship building and trust, and be an ally to move people, to be an ally and move people to become more of an accomplice. We talk a lot about being allies today, but we have a lot of times that people are performative allies. I think it was Colonel that brought up being woke, and we have a lot of woke people, but not a lot of people who are accomplice, who will actually be a part of when we're talking about racism, being a part of being those who are anti-racist and bringing down systems of oppression and looking at policies and procedures and speaking out against those and changing those things, and looking at ways that we can truly be inclusive on our campuses, whether that is for individuals who have disability, creating content in classrooms that are universally designed for those who are struggling with neurodiversity or understanding neurodiversity in ways that can be implemented, positively implemented on campus. Creating and maintaining an inclusive environment, intentionally celebrating and appreciating diversity, and then avoid tokenizing individuals. Oftentimes people get tokenized, whether they're we have the token person of color in this office, we have the token person who may identify as the LGBTQ person, and they're asked to speak for all people that are a part of the group that they may identify with. Being mindful of using inclusive language, and then utilizing your your power, if you stand in a place of privilege, is speaking up for those who are voiceless, and setting aside your ego, and remember to check your biases and privileges and assumptions. Mistakes will happen. That goes back to the very first video that we showed. Mistakes will happen. It's how we respond to those that matters. And so I'm not sure if Kiki, you may have some final thoughts before we end tonight. And I want to make sure that you have the opportunity to speak, and also anyone in the group. And I know we're over time, but any of you all to have questions, so I know we moved pretty quickly at the end.
I have no final thoughts. All of these are excellent. Yes, go forth and be great people. Debbie, go ahead.
Well, I was going to say that I found that video. I could try to share it if you give me share screen. That the one for the Hidden Figures bathroom scene. It's up to people if they want to. It's 2 minutes long, less than 2 minutes.
I think we're going to let people rest, Debbie.
Okay. All right.
Any other questions? Any thoughts? Last minute concerns?
I just had
Yes.
one quick thought. One of the details about systemic and even institutionalized racism is that one of the infuriating things about it is there is no one individual that I can point at and say it's his fault, he did it. And you know, when you try to explain it to other people, that's what also makes it difficult. I can't say such and such did it, and so we should get rid of such and such. You know, for example, Trump was blamed for a lot of things, but these things, you know, existed before Trump ever had any power, before he was ever born. They existed, and they will exist after he's dead and gone. And so we can't, you know, just say it's one person. There are many hands involved in keeping these systems alive, and so it will require many hands to dismantle the systems.
When you're thinking about systematic oppression, you know, there's people who create it, people who are continue to, like you're saying, continue to sustain it, and people who are complicit with it, and see things happen, and will continue to allow it to happen, and say, you know, I'm the good person. I work with the Cultivating Inclusive Excellence. That's a presentation that Kiki and I are doing tomorrow, which is a module that we do for our for professional staff. And there's a part that we talk about people on the moving sidewalk and helping people understand what not racist and anti-racism is, being anti-racist is, because I think a lot of times people have pulled those terms together and say, oh, I'm anti-racist because I'm not racist. And being a not racist is not the same thing as being anti-racist. And the picture that we give is the moving sidewalk that's at the airport. People who are racist will use all of their power to keep a person off. They won't get on the moving sidewalk to keep other people off. And then you have those who are not racist who will stand there on the moving sidewalk and see people keeping you off or try to prevent you from getting on, and just will keep on moving and that's those who they're not racist, and they're also being complicit in the system. And then you have those who are anti-racist, and the person who is anti-racist is the person who will dismantle. If I can't get on it, nobody can get on it. And nobody's going to benefit from this. And so they are the one that will dismantle the systems that are there. And so helping people understand that there are people who Zorby Houston, all your skin folk ain't your kinfolk. And so there are people who that look like you and may identify as a part of the same community as you, but will have internalized bias and that will also uphold different systems that are there. And that falls within racism and other areas of oppression as well. Any other questions or final thoughts? I know it's 9 o'clock. People may be sleeping. For some reason, my kids are still moving and not in the bed. I still hear them upstairs.
I'll just recommend the book How to Be an Anti-Racist. So I probably will go back and read it again, because he uses the words racist and anti-racist so much that sometimes it sort of messes with my brain as I'm reading, but it's a very, very good book. So it talks about the things that you were just speaking about.
There's some very great books. I wish I had the opportunity to have just to give you like a list of books. I'm gonna start creating lists and put it in the chat and just like, here's a list of books if you like to read. I'm a reader, so.
Yeah, we created a library in career services, and our office manager actually, she used some kind of tech software, so it actually works like a library where you check out the book and you turn it back in. But that's where I picked up the book. There's a number of really excellent ones that we have. So if you want to share anytime, let me know.
That's awesome. Any other questions, queries? I am very grateful that you all were able to come tonight. And I am blessed to have had conversation and to meet with you all and have conversation. I am a better person for it. So Kiki, I'm gonna let you have the final word tonight.
Yes, I just want to thank everybody for coming and sharing in this space, being vulnerable, and offering us your thoughts and opinions. That can be tough, especially in conversations about race and difference. But I appreciate you all's attention and participation, and good night.
Good night.